Oolong tea. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are talking about perhaps the most exciting category of tea, oolong, also known as woolong, also known as blue tea sometimes. It's a style of tea with a tremendous amount of diversity. Since we've covered some of the basics, processing in other videos, we're just going to glaze over them and focus on what makes an oolong tea an oolong tea. Regarding the picking, there is an unusual choice of leaf compared to the quality-focused white, green, and yellow teas that we have already discussed. While those teas use young leaves, oolong teas tend to use a more mature leaf. I've brought it up in other videos several times now, but the younger leaves have less going on chemically than the older leaves. These chemicals are quite important in the world of oolong tea, and to not have access to them would really limit the interesting aspects that oolong teas can obtain. So, the leaves are picked. They wither, and depending on the type of oolong being made, they generally get bruised up a little bit at this stage. This bruising encourages early oxidation, and the chemicals in the withered leaf, they start to go through transformations here. And this is crucial for this style of tea. Since the leaf is older, you're already starting out with an abundance of chemicals that are not available in other styles of premium tea. And upon withering, these abundant chemicals get manipulated. The bruising aspect before the kill-green process alone is significant enough to give the final product a completely new category of tea, which is oolong. In a green tea, the tea goes through the kill-green process before oxidation can occur. And in a black tea, the tea goes through the kill-green process after a complete oxidation occurs, like 100%. That means that the whole area in the middle between green and black tea is technically oolong tea. The oxidation factor gives oolong a vast spectrum of potential flavor. At the low oxidations, they can taste very green, and at high oxidation, they can taste very black. In fact, these terms, they're becoming blurred recently, where in places like China, producers who claim to be making black tea, they will technically make more of an oolong tea instead because it tastes better. Looking at India, to this day, we've been calling Darjeeling teas black teas, even when they're obviously very limited in oxidation and thus very green in color, as is the case of the majority of the first flush Darjeelings. After the kill-green process, the tea is rolled, and those oxidized chemicals mix in extravagant ways. And then they will go through the baking and drying. This is another crucial step, and I think it's easy to compare it to steak. If you buy from a butcher a really good piece of meat, raw, you could eat it. But texturally, it's kind of unappealing, it's bloody, it's kind of metallic tasting. Even though it's a very great piece of meat, really well marbled, it's not ready yet. You really should be cooking it. Getting a sear on the outside, you will get this phenomenon called the Maillard reaction, in which the flavors and the chemicals, they caramelize and change. And in the case of both steak and tea, for the better. The rolled tea is baked, and this brings out even more changes in those abundant chemical marriages that we obtain through rolling. The baking process can be very light, to the point where if you didn't know it was baked, you couldn't tell. It could also be so deep to the point where it's the majority of what you taste. There's oolong teas all over the spectrum, and the baking process is not even where it ends. Because then there's the matter of aging the tea. A lot of oolongs, especially coming out of Taiwan, are aged. Tea in its finished state is quite dry. It's around 3% moisture content. And just to use Taiwan as an example, it's a very humid place. So once the finished tea, it sits out for too long, the moisture content will slowly creep back up. And if it's not re-dried out, there's going to be some risk of rot or mold damage. So every few years, these teas have to be re-roasted. Those flavors and aromas in the tea will change, and you're going to start to get, especially after repeated re-roasting, layers and layers of flavor that kind of build on and change over time. It's kind of like a mille-feuille pastry, and they can get incredibly complex. The light oolongs of Taiwan can, often remind me of this kind of yellow floral flavor or aroma, kind of like sunflowers. They can be neutral, fruity, kind of like pears, sometimes pretty exotic, kind of like pumpkin pie. The light oolongs of China, so famously kind of like Tieguanyin, they can remind me of snow pea leaves or the white orchids. You can go, in China again, just a little bit west into Guangdong, and you get into the area where Phoenix oolongs are made. And those can be, really stone fruity, like peaches or nectarines, floral, kind of like dark violet orchids. And, sometimes so incredibly fruity that they're like Hawaiian punch. Or then you go like super far to the east in China, and then you're getting like from northern Fujian, the Wuyi rock oolongs with those aromas of like grapefruit, wet cement, very roasted. And then go into Taiwan with the super aged and re-roasted teas. They can be like antique furniture, like cherry, balsamic vinegar. And then also from Taiwan, you can get total opposite side of the spectrum with Oriental Beauty, which is like anything that you can imagine it smells like, it seems sometimes. They're incredibly fragrant, like grapes and plums. When I was beginning my journey into the world of tea, it was oolong that first really captured my interest. And whenever I feel my interest is waning, it's oolong that really sets me back on the right path. I would recommend anybody, even remotely interested in tea, spend some time to really try the different styles of oolong out there. There is so much diversity that for someone to say, I don't like oolong tea, it's nonsense. And as a professional, I should be kind of impartial and like everything, but, frankly, oolong tea absolutely destroys the other categories of tea in terms of what is interesting. For me, Phoenix oolongs have been my favorite, though from time to time I can really get into Tieguanyin and, especially Taiwan's teas too. I have right now a few oolong teas for sale in the shop, and if you'd like to learn a little bit more about them in particular, I would recommend reading the essays I've written about them. Those are going to be in the product descriptions. As always, thank you so much for listening. Next week, we're going to talk about black tea. Bye-bye.